Okay, good morning or good day, wherever you are. Today, we're going to be talking about following safe working practices in an automotive workplace. My name is Andrew Tregoning. I'm one of the automotive trainers here at the Gold Coast Trade College. And the unit we'll be covering today is one of the core units in the qualification AURASA002, which is the pathway to an automotive apprenticeship. So I'm just going to share the screen now and we'll discuss a little bit about the initial requirements of the course and an introduction for the actual course unit today. So this unit describes the performance outcomes required to identify and follow safety and emergency procedures in an auto workplace. It involves safety procedures to be followed when using workplace hand tools and handheld power tools, fixed equipment and chemicals, and when running vehicles and machinery. It also includes the individual's responsibility for safety and emergency response in the event of an accident or an incident. Quite an important unit here to learn. It also applies to those working on agricultural machinery, heavy commercial vehicles, light vehicles, marine vessels, motorcycles, mobile plant machinery, and outdoor power equipment, all related to the automotive service repair industry. Some of the key outcomes today are to be able to identify and follow workplace safety procedures, and also identify and follow workplace emergency procedures. So I'll just go on to the next resource we've got available to us now, and that's our PowerPoint presentation. So we've got follow safe working practices in an auto workplace. As an initial basic understanding, we need to have an understanding of basic aspects of WHS and OHS legislation. I think it's worthwhile for everybody to understand or know that there is an Act of Parliament, the Work Health and Safety Act 2011, which provides a framework to protect the health and safety and welfare of all workers at work. It also protects the health and safety of all other people who might be affected by that work. And all duties under the WHS Act are qualified by the term reasonably practicable. So the WHS Act also sets out the requirements for the following: incident notification, consultation with workers, issue resolution, inspector powers and functions, and offences and penalties. Continued, adding to that is all workers are protected by the WHS Act, including employees. So you might be an employee at a business. That particular business might employ contractors as well. Well, they are also protected. Subcontractors as well. So contractors of contractors would be a subcontractor. Outworkers, apprentices and trainees, work experience student, volunteers, or any other employers who perform work as well. Continuing on from that, the Act also provides protection for the general public, so their health and safety is not placed at risk by workplace activities. So for an example, in an automotive workplace, you might be bringing your car in for a service, so therefore you're a member of the general public. So the Act also provides protection for you as a general public member, just to ensure that your safety is not placed at risk by the activities that are being carried on at that particular workshop. So the Act also places the primary health and safety duty on the person conducting the business or undertaking, shortly or commonly known as a PCBU, so person conducting a business or an undertaking. The PCB must ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety of workers at the workplace. And duties are also placed on officers of a PCBU, workers and other persons at that workplace. So each individual has a responsibility. The primary health and safety duty falls on the person conducting the business. Further down the line, the other duties are also placed on officers. So you might have within your workplace a health and safety officer. You might be a worker at that workplace as well. So it's worthwhile knowing and remembering that everybody has individual responsibilities at a workplace when it comes to this legislation. So it's far-reaching and covers just about everybody in a workplace. So just to break that down a little bit further, starting with the employer. The employer has its own responsibilities, and it is their duty to provide employees with a safe and healthy work environment. So under that Act, Workplace Health and Safety Act, or Work Health and Safety Act 2011, employers must assess risks and implement and review control measures to prevent or minimise exposure to risks. They also must properly manage exposure to risks. Employers must identify workplace hazards, determine who might be harmed and how they may be harmed, and also decide on control measures. Not only decide on those measures, but put some measures in place. Review those controls regularly as well. WorkCover Queensland provides details about risks and how to reduce them in specific industries, business types, and occupations. So the point there is there's information available to workplaces to assist those workplaces in reducing injuries and specific workplace risks in all sorts of different occupations. So just a little bit further down the line, workers and their responsibilities. Within that Act, workers are classified as any person who carries out work in any capacity for a person undertaking a business or a PCBU. Workers must take reasonable care for their own health and safety and electrical safety. They must take reasonable care that their conduct, their acts or omissions does not adversely affect the health and safety of others or adversely affect the health and safety of other persons or property. They must comply so far as they are reasonably able to with instructions. They must cooperate with the reasonable health and safety and electrical safety policy or procedures that have been notified to workers. Typically in a workplace, there may well be a health and safety committee. So a health and safety committee would be a group of individuals within that business, and they develop and carry out measures to ensure health and safety at work. It would be their specific role to come up with and consider rules and procedures for that specific workplace. Generally, those people are experienced within that workplace and have a broad sort of knowledge of how the workplace operates. A PCBU must set up HSC within 2 months of being requested to do so, or by 5 or more workers in a workplace, or when required by the legislation. At least half of the members must be workers that have not been nominated by the business themselves. So they must be independent of that business, or not independent of the business, but they must not be nominated by the business. These are all aspects under the Act to maintain some, to maintain a reasonable decision-making process by any particular committee. They can choose one or more members to be in that HSC. An inspector can be requested to assist the process by any person who is party to the committee, and a HSC must meet at least once every 3 months and at reasonable time at the request of at least half of the members of the committee. So workplace personnel and their roles. So let's just cover a few different roles for different personnel within a business, and how we would describe that particular person, or how we describe that particular person. So a PCBU, and this will be one of the questions in your assessment, by the way. A PCBU is a person conducting a business or an undertaking. So that person participates in making decisions that affect the whole or a substantial part of the business or undertaking. Under that person, there'd be an officer or a manager. That particular person is one who makes or participates in making decisions that affect the whole or a substantial part of the business, has the capacity to significantly affect the corporation's financial standing, on whose instructions the directors of the corporations are accustomed to act. So that would be a manager or some sort of officer. Anyone carrying out work in any capacity for a PCBU including direct employees, contractors or subcontractors, and their employees, labour hire, engaged to work in the business, or undertaking out workers, apprentices and trainees and students. So that particular one, there, number C, letter C, is workers. D, the last section there, is the person elected by the members. This would be an officer or a workplace health and safety officer, elected by the members of a work group within the PCBU or across a number of businesses to represent that work group during consultation on work health and safety issues. So just to describe the description of a worker, it's anyone carrying out work in any capacity for a PCBU, including direct employees, contractors, subcontractors, labour hire, trainees, students, work experience and volunteers. And then we have a HSR, health and safety representative. I think I might have doubled up that worker and HSR there on that PowerPoint. So there's a little image there just depicting a meeting. So it's very common for businesses to have workplace health and safety meetings with the business owners and also the health and safety representatives within that business as well. Of course, injuries and even deaths, even small injuries can have a big impact on a business's profitability and the way they operate as well. So it's worthwhile and very common that businesses have meetings regularly in ensuring the safety of all their workers. So just getting down to a little bit more specific. As an individual, you're going to come across pretty much every day in your working life some sort of personal protective equipment. That equipment takes on many different types, shapes and sizes. Probably the most common things would be high-vis clothing, would be steel-cap shoes or protective footwear, goggles and glasses as well, ear protection, as I said, goggles for eye protection, hand protection for things like gloves, and also clothing that would protect your skin and the remainder of your body from being exposed to dangerous chemicals or substances. Also got things like hard hats as well, and safety harnesses and clips and the like. All of these things form personal protective equipment. Takes on many different forms. There's businesses out there that supply all of that sort of information. All that sort of equipment. Just getting on to some of the concerns that a lot of workplaces have, is slips, trips and falls. Each year, slips, trips and falls result in many thousands of preventable injuries. The most common are musculoskeletal injuries, cuts, bruises, fractures and dislocations, but more serious injuries can also happen. So over the 12 years between 2003 and 2015, slips, trips and falls caused the death of 386 workers. Those slips, trips and falls led to 23% of serious claims. It's a pretty significant part of injury within the workplace. Were caused by environmental factors 56% of the time. Environmental factors can include slippery surfaces following rain, or spills, poorly designed walkways, poor lighting on stairs, walkways, and trip hazards, for example, from poorly stored materials or cluttered situations. So some of the other causes of slips, trips and falls. Slips would occur when your foot loses traction with the ground surface due to inappropriate footwear or walking on slippery floor surfaces that are highly polished, wet or greasy. Trips occur when you catch your foot on an object or surface. In most cases, people trip on low obstacles that are hard to spot, such as uneven edges in flooring, loose mats, open drawers, untidy tools or electrical cables. Pretty common out there in the workplace, all of those things. Falls can result from a slip or a trip that may occur during falls from low heights such as steps, chairs and curbs, falling into a hole or into a ditch or water. So what we're going to do now is just share the screen again to just have a bit of a look at a slips, trips and falls video, just to give us a bit of an overview of what that might look like in our workplace. So just take a few minutes and watch this video. Hope you can all hear that. I'll just add some more volume to that so we can hear it a little bit easier. Not sure how the volume is coming through on your end, but here we go.
For example, repairing vehicles and tyres, draining fuel, and handling dangerous substances. Do you know how to work so you stay safe?
Sorry, I've just said this was slips, trips and falls. So this is a general workplace health and safety in a motor vehicle repair shop. So this will give us some idea of some of the things that we're faced with as an automotive technician. I'll just play that again.
To avoid fires and explosions, keep constantly flammable substances to a minimum and separate them from ignition sources. Store flammable liquids in stable sealed containers and keep things tidy. When draining petrol from a vehicle, use a fuel retriever. Connect earthing straps and disconnect the vehicle battery. Work in well-ventilated areas with fire extinguisher to hand. When inflating tyres, use airline hoses that are long enough for you to stand at a safe distance. Inflate large tyres in cages or clamp to the floor to confine parts in case of failure. When working underneath vehicles, raise tipping trailers or vehicle cabs. Use correct, properly maintained equipment to raise the load and support it. Ensure that the vehicle cannot move. When using lifts, raise the vehicle and then rock it to check it is secure before lifting it higher. Before removing heavy parts, check this will not affect the vehicle's stability. When draining waste oil, use systems of collection, wear nitrile gloves, and wash your hands regularly. To reduce risks of being poisoned by engine fumes, connect extraction equipment when engines are running in the workshop and always keep the workshop well ventilated. Remember that there are many other hazards that you are exposed to in your garage, so before you start any task, stop and ask yourself, how will I do the work? Do I know enough to ensure that I will not be hurt? This doesn't take long but may mean that you stay safe and healthy. Remember that additional precautions may be required in certain situations, for instance, pregnancy. Contact your local labour inspection services or other organisations that can provide you with information to stay safe, and take a look at the brochure we've prepared for you to help you work in a safe manner.
Well, there we go. That's a quick video on general safety within the automotive workshop. And I might just have a quick look at another video now. I'll just share this screen again. It's specifically on slips, trips and falls. So the first one was more general. This next one's going to be on slips, trips and falls, which is a major part of injuries within the workplace.
When approaching a work area, the first thing on your mind should be doing a quick safety inspection. There are many things that will affect your working conditions. Some can quickly cause your workday to come to an unhappy end. An inspection should make you aware of any potential hazards. In almost every workplace, the main hazard is from trips and falls, so your first inspection should be a visual scan of the walking surfaces. Examine the route you will be using and pay special attention to any areas where you will be walking while carrying equipment. Whenever you carry a piece of equipment like a ladder, a tool, or almost anything else, the extra weight, no matter how minor, alters your center of balance. This causes your body to react in a different way than if you were empty-handed. So if your foot contacts something along the way, you are much more likely to fall than if you were empty-handed. Look for depressions or dips in the walking surface or soft spots that can cause you to lose your balance. Be alert for anything like a piece of plywood that may be covering a hole in the floor. The person who put it there knows what's underneath. You don't. Look for liquid on the floor. That little wet spot, is it water, oil, or could it be a small pool of hydraulic fluid that's as slick as ice? Step on that with your front foot outstretched, and down you go. With each step you take when walking, your foot comes off the ground about a ½ inch, so anything higher than that can arrest your foot movement. This sudden stop is what causes most falls. Make sure your visual inspection includes looking for anything that is sticking up in your walking area, and don't ignore anything that could cause your foot to roll, like an extension cord. A visual inspection becomes more critical in areas where the lighting is bad. If it's hard to see, slow down and look closer. Watch out for trip and fall hazards. Thanks for watching and have a safe day.
So that was just a quick video on slips and falls. It's pretty, as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, slips and falls are a pretty significant part of or a significant part of the many injuries that happen within a workplace. It says on our little PowerPoint here, they're a major cause of workplace injuries. 15% of all accidents, the second leading cause of injury, 25,000 slip, trip and fall accidents occurred daily in the US. So they're just some of the stats that are coming out of the USA for those sorts of things. So just off slips, trips and falls onto workshop storage now. Now I think in the automotive workplace, we often have lots of different things to store. They often look quite messy, automotive workplaces, but a lot can be said for appropriate workshop storage. You can see I've got some images down here of, I would say, best practice within auto workshops, ensuring that the workshop is clean and tidy, things are stored away in their appropriate locations. This minimises trip hazards and other hazards around the workplace and makes things a lot easier to work. It goes along with good housekeeping. I've got a couple of images here. You can see image on the left is what you would say would be a very good workshop with lots of cleanliness, and it's very neat and tidy. The floors have been painted. I would say that would be some sort of non-slip surface as well. They've removed all sorts of waste materials. It looks pretty well lit as well. So it's a pretty good example of good housekeeping. As opposed to the image on the right-hand side, and I think we've all seen a workshop like that. There's equipment and bits and pieces all over the place. No real order to anything there. You can see how both of those workshops are quite a marked difference between those two workshops. Of course, the one on the left-hand side, as you're looking at the screen, would be the safer one to be in, and the other one would be something that needs a bit of work. Just following on with that, tips for storing items. Plan your space, even if your garage is currently filled to the roof with junk. It still needs a little bit of planning. Purge and clean. So I think part of cleanliness is making sure you get rid of the things that you don't need. That can help declutter significantly. Get it off the floor and into separate bins. Use creative space solutions. Keep bins organized. Label it and make it visible as well. So while you're doing your cleanup, and while you're using your day-to-day or in your day-to-day work, manual handling techniques is also something we should consider. I've got a little image here of correct manual handling techniques. If we had to plan that lift, we would say use our legs to lift, maintain good posture. So keep your back straight, do not bend your back. So bend your knees and at your hips there and your knees. Straight back, have the load close to your body, don't have it too far away, so hug the load. So bent knees, straight back, good posture, hug the load would be a good manual handling technique for lifting those objects which are heavy. Sometimes equipment is very heavy, like engines, gearboxes, and all sorts of other things within a workshop. And we need a little bit of assistance to help lift items. So I've got some images of appropriate equipment. We could use a trolley to help transport. We can use a floor crane. You can see lifting 44-gallon drum there. We can use that one there, the yellow, that would be some sort of gearbox transmission lifter, or even just for lifting a heavy box onto a shelf. There's an excellent resource to be able to have in a workplace. You can see this vertical lifter, a little bit like a forklift or a pallet lifter. Again, lifting even more heavy items up onto a shelf. We've got another trolley here with a ratcheting strap arrangement also for lifting heavy things onto shelves. And that one there you'll probably recognise if you've ever been around an automotive workshop. That would be your engine crane, engine lifter for lifting engines out of cars. So all of those items, and there's many, many more. These are just a few examples. These sorts of things are going to be able to assist you in lifting heavy items. So the key here is here to use the appropriate piece of equipment for the job, to try and find the right piece of equipment. As we mentioned in our first tile, planning the lift is worthwhile as well. So there are 7 steps to consider when you're planning the lift. That is the weight of the load, the location of the load's centre of gravity. Is it top heavy or bottom heavy? Is it some sort of awkward shape? So consider its centre of gravity. We're looking at the overall maximum dimensions of the load. So that's really important when you want to know where you're going to put that particular item. It's going to fit. So have some consideration for the dimensions of that load as well. The location and the quantity of the lifting points. There may be or there may not be lifting points on a particular item, but you want to consider where they are and how that load is going to be, as it's being lifted, how that load is going to affect or be affected by lifting. Is it going to fall off balance or perhaps tip over when you're lifting? That's something to consider as well. The selection of the appropriate lifting equipment. So that goes back to this previous tile. Select the right piece of equipment. Have a look up. Always have a look for height restrictions when you're lifting something. Are you going to hit the roof? Are you going to hit some kind of something up high, some lighting perhaps, or wiring? And always step back and do yourself a quick risk assessment on the job that you're doing to make sure that you've considered all the risks around lifting. A risk assessment might not be, or might also cover things like minor injuries rather than major injuries and personal sort of death. So even just the smallest injury or small risk can turn into something much more significant. All right, just that's on lifting. Our next tile is personal hygiene in the workplace. It's also significant to maintain correct hygiene as an individual. Some things to do. Do clean up after yourself. Regularly wipe down your workstation. Wash your cups and mugs daily. Now in these current times when I'm in the recording of this particular tutorial here, we're in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis around the world, and it's all about cleanliness and personal hygiene. So these are some of the examples we should be using. So use sanitizer, adhere to the company's hygiene policy. You'll see those sorts of policies becoming more and more prevalent in workplaces. Wash your hands regularly. Don't sneeze or cough without covering your nose and mouth. Shower daily as well. So as a quick 4-step process: wash, cover, avoid, and clean. All right, just on to safety signs and their meanings. We can see by this tile, there are, in this particular example, 3 different types of signs. We've got those blue signs with the white background. In this first instance there, we've got gloves, eye protection, and ear protection. Those blue signs are known as mandatory signs. They are signs that you might see at the front of the workplace. They might depict something like any of these diagrams here. For example, wear eye protection. That is mandatory eye protection. So those blue signs, whatever they're telling you to do is mandatory. And that's our first sign there. Mandatory signs specify an instruction that must be carried out. Symbols are depicted on a blue circular background, and signed wording is in black lettering on a white background. Mandatory signs. Our next ones are prohibition signs. So that's the red circle the line going through it means it's something that you should not be doing. Smoking, for argument's sake, should not be driving a forklift in this area. We should not be walking in this area as well, would be a couple of examples. These are specifying behaviours or actions that are not permitted. The circle and the slash is depicted in red over the action symbol in black. The sign wording is in black lettering on a white background. Prohibition signs comply with an Australian standard and those regulations. The other ones that's not in this diagram here, we'll get to this, the orange or yellow triangles in a minute, but just before that, we also have emergency information signs. You'll see those typically around the first aid, and also things like directions to emergency related facilities such as exits, first aid and safety equipment, etc. Typically they feature a white symbol on a green background. So emergency information signs. Danger signs. It's another example of a sign to provide warning when a hazard or a dangerous condition is likely to be threatening to your life. The word danger is featured inside a red oval inside a black rectangle. So in this instance, danger confined space. Getting down to the next one, warning signs. These signs warn us hazards or a hazardous condition that is not likely to be life-threatening. The hazard symbol is a black on yellow background and a triangle, and is depicted around the sign, the hazard symbol itself. Sign wording is in black, again on a yellow background. So this particular sign is depicting, of course, the risk of electric shock. So you might see these signs in all sorts of different situations. I'll just go back up to our other tile. You can see that particular sign. That'll be electric shock. That'll be it's an exclamation mark, so it might just be something that's visible. There's a trip hazard. Don't drive a forklift here. There might be some cranes overhead, or it might be particularly cold. So as it says in this particular description here, it's not likely to be life-threatening in those examples. However, it is a hazard and it is a warning sign. Just continuing on from that, we've got fire signs. Fire signs advise the location of fire alarms, firefighting equipment. They contain a white symbol and text on a red background. So that's a quick example of the different types of signs. I might just go over those again. We've got mandatory signs, prohibition signs, emergency information signs, danger signs, warning signs, and fire signs. Okay, so let's just jump to now understanding fire extinguisher classes in Australia. So in Australia, there are 6 classes of fire extinguishers, classes A to F, A, B, C, D, E, F. Individual fire extinguishers can be rated for single class or multiple classes, depending on their application. Classes dictate the types of fires which an extinguisher can be used. So below this list here is a complete list of the fire classes in Australia. We've narrowed it down to general combustibles, combustible and flammable liquids, flammable gases, combustible metals, electrical devices and appliances, cooking fats and oils. So it's vital that you get the right extinguisher for your industry or business, because extinguishers can be ineffective or even dangerous when they're used on the wrong fire. So if they're used on a fire which they have not been rated against. So on a fire extinguisher in Australia, you will see it's a class A or a class B. Typically those fire extinguishers in a workplace would be close by, for argument's sake, if we had cooking fats or oils. So in an automated workshop, we're going to have some oil somewhere. A class F fire extinguisher should be somewhere near our oils, and that goes along with combustible and flammable liquids as well. So we'd most likely have a class B or even a class F fire extinguisher somewhere near where our oil is kept or commonly used. So common sense suggests that those fire extinguishers are close to their particular end use. So just getting on to general machine safety. So as an automotive apprentice or worker in the industry, we are going to be using some type of machinery, whether it's a drill press, whether it's a lathe, or whether it's a hand tool like an angle grinder, or it might be a welder, or there's many different types of machinery that gets used in an automotive workshop, such as wheel balancing equipment and all sorts of things as well. Air conditioning, regassing, brake machining equipment. So there's all sorts of different types of machines that we would use. So as a general guide, please ensure all safety checks are carried out before commencing use of equipment and machinery. Make sure there are guards placed on tools and machines for your own safety. Do not alter or remove those guards. Stand away from machines when they are in use. Do not crowd a machine. Never leave a machine running or unattended. And disconnect the power from portable tools when changing a blade, a disc or a belt or a bit. So that's just some general machine safety rules. Going on from that, sometimes equipment becomes faulty and is not able to be used again. Best practice is to isolate and tag faulty equipment. So in this example, we've got a machine that has a do not operate tag on it. And over on the left-hand side, we can see another machine which has a danger tag attached to that as well. That's, of course, for your own safety and for safety of those others in your workshop that may walk up to that machine and consider or think they might have to use it. As soon as they see that tag, they're going to know that it's been locked out for some reason or another. Electricity and water. It's worth mentioning, and I think common sense would indicate that electricity and water do not mix. We all know that we shouldn't be using electricity around water, so we need to take extreme care when using those electrical appliances near a pool, a pond, a water feature or a creek. All equipment that's being used anywhere near, specifically near water, but in fact in all cases, electrical equipment should be used via a safety switch. And that safety switch would be in the meter box or the fuse box in your workplace. If equipment's not designed to operate in water, make sure it cannot fall or slide in. Mains operated equipment like pumps and lights must be installed and used in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, fit for purpose. Submersible pumps must be either of the earth type or 12-volt system to keep extension leads and cords, electrical appliances out of the water. Okay, just on to vehicle lifting equipment. We talked about equipment in a few slides ago, general equipment for lifting heavy items. When we're talking about lifting vehicles specifically, vehicle equipment lifts can come in all sorts of different types, shapes and sizes. You can see a couple on our screen there. We've got some hoists. We've got the scissor style hoists over here on the right hand side. They are what they call a scissor lift. And we've got the 2-post hoists and the one down the bottom here, the 4-post hoist. We've got the engine lifter and the floor jack as well. Along with axle stands, which we'll get to in the next slide, I think, we have what they call an SWL, or a safe working load on those lifting equipment. So anything that's going to be holding a load or lifting a load should have a safe working load marked or stamped on that piece of equipment. For obvious reasons, if you've got a car that's too heavy to be lifted by that particular vehicle lifter, then you need to choose another lifter or some other method of lifting that vehicle. So we do not want to be exceeding the safe working load on those particular pieces of equipment. They all should be either stamped or have a SWL painted or fixed to that particular item. So whether it's a floor jack, axle stands, a vehicle lifter, it will all have an SWL on there. Just on to using a vehicle hoist, a few safety requirements or safety considerations would be: inspect your lift daily, make any repairs with original equipment parts, do not block or override controls, never load your lift beyond the rated capacity. So consider things that might be in the boot of a car, extra people. You wouldn't want to be lifting up extra people on that lift as well. So just the car by itself. Positioning of the vehicle and operation of the lift should be done only by trained and authorised personnel. If you're not sure how to operate one of those lifts, then get some training on that lift. Make sure you position it properly, the vehicle properly on that lift, because there's more than one car that's fallen off a lift because it hasn't been properly positioned. Never raise a vehicle with anyone inside it. Customers or bystanders should not be in the lift area during operation. Always keep the lift area free of debris. Do not hit or run over lift arms, adapters, or any other axle supports. Using a vehicle hoist continued. Position lift supports to contact the vehicle manufacturer's recommended lifting points. So each car underneath it has a specific lifting point. So you should be raising the lift until those supports contact the vehicle in the correct location. If you are working under a vehicle, the lift should be raised high enough for the locking device to be engaged. So you'll have a locking device within the mechanism of the lift. As the lift lifts the vehicle up, you can turn the locking lever so that vehicle cannot fall. It's a mechanical system which engages onto the vertical members of that lift. There are some vehicles, removal or installation of components may cause a critical shift in the vehicle's centre of gravity. So use, if need be, supplementary stands to prevent instability. So for example, you might be pulling the gearbox out of a car, and gearboxes can be quite heavy, which really would affect or alter the centre of gravity of that car once that gearbox has been pulled out, potentially causing that to be toppled over. So you can use a supplementary stand in the case where a vehicle might become unstable or unstable on a lift. That's something to consider as well. And lastly, I guess before lowering the lift, be sure materials are removed from underneath the vehicle. So in a workplace, we might have an oil drain tin, we might have tools, we might even have a trolley underneath the car. So we ought to make sure that we remove those things from under the vehicle before we lower it to the ground. All right, jacks and stands. Here's a quick rundown on jacks and stands. You'll see those in just about every automated workplace. We have floor jacks, different shapes and sizes are available. And we also have axle stands, again, different shapes and sizes available. Of course, they all have a safe working load, either stamped on or painted to those, painted onto those items, so you know what you safe working load of that particular item. Some safety tips when using jacks and stands: use the right one for the job. Too big or too small is not going to serve you very well. Again, ensure the correct safe working load. Never work on or get completely or bodily under a vehicle supported only by a jack. Jacks can fail. Jacks are mechanical hydraulic components. Hydraulics can fail and mechanical systems can fail as well. So never get under a car if it's only supported by a jack. Always use vehicle support stands. Ensure the stands are in good condition. You know, sometimes we use these stands for years and years and don't consider their condition. Always chock the wheels remaining on the ground. So if you're lifting up just the front or the rear of a car, make sure the other two wheels that are remaining on the ground have been chocked as well to avoid rolling away and potentially falling off the stand or the jack. So place the jack on the correct jacking point on the car. So we're not going to just jack it under any old thing under the car. There's a specific point under the car where you should jack it. You will find that information in the workshop manual. Ensure the jack or the stand is on firm level ground. So we don't want a jack or a stand being on soft ground. Grass is probably a good example. You see people doing work on their cars, on their front lawn, and grass is relatively soft and soil is relatively soft, so it can easily fall over. So make sure the ground is firm and level. Lower vehicle on the stands nice and gently. Once your vehicle is lifted and on stands, ensure there's some stability. If you need to use extra stands, there's no rules on how many stands you can use. Typically there's 4, but if you need to use 5 or 6, then that's perfectly okay as well. Just on to a little bit more vehicle safety when servicing. When working on vehicles, be aware of moving engine parts. Long hair, fingers, hands, loose clothing can all be caught up in moving parts and can easily cause injury. Wearing jewelry is particularly dangerous. It can be easily caught in rotating engine parts. Again, hot engine parts can cause burns, particularly exhaust systems. You've just taken a car around the block for a service and you open, or for a road test, you open the bonnet and those exhaust systems will be very, very hot. Of course, I think it goes without saying, fuels of any type, petrol, diesel and LPG, can cause explosions and fire when released near hot engines, especially fuel vapors. They are particularly flammable. So high voltage ignition systems are becoming more and more prevalent in today's cars, particularly electric vehicles. They operate on high voltages and current and pose a significant safety risk if procedures aren't followed. So always consult your owner's manual and workshop manual for the specific vehicle that you're working on, particularly when we're talking about high voltage. It can be deadly in very quickly. So just on to hazardous material storage. So oils, brake fluid, chemicals, cleaning products, all automotive workshops use a number of general cleaning materials, all sorts of different oils and chemicals. So there are some general principles for the safe storage of hazardous chemicals. These general principles include, but not limited to, ensuring safe design, location and installation of storage and handling systems, example, racking systems and tanks. Should be separating incompatible substances to prevent reactive chemicals interacting. So sometimes mixing or having chemicals beside each other can be dangerous, particularly if they're incompatible and they react with each other. Chlorine's a pretty good example. That can often react with all sorts of different substances. Control potential ignition sources. Now, flammable substances often give off vapors, and those vapors will easily ignite. So we must ensure we're controlling those potential ignition sources around flammable substances. We should have appropriate safety signage and placards around those storage systems. So be prepared for any spill containment and have cleanup systems as well. We should have emergency plans in place to deal with an incident involving chemicals. We need to have the appropriate PPE and store it correctly. For example, respirators should be sealed. We need to have firefighting equipment that's easily accessible, and we need to secure chemicals from unauthorized access. So, getting on to some other more specific dangers, brake dust. Now, I'm not sure if everyone's aware that, but brake dust can pose a significant danger to your lungs and your well-being. Materials that modern brakes are made of cause dust to accumulate. You can see, I've got a little diagram here, there's some brake dust that's accumulated inside a wheel rim. That's typically where you would find it. You would not use an air blower to blow that dust away. The air blower is going to cause that dust to become airborne. That dust would then be easily breathed in by you or one of your fellow workers. As the highlighted section here says, do not ever breathe in brake dust. There are many types of metals and copper, titanium and magnesium that are harmful to our human body. Older brakes may have asbestos in them, which does cause lung cancer. So brake dust, whether it's or fine dust, whether it's brake dust or other sort of dust, is very, very dangerous to our health. This brings us to safety data sheets. Now, safety data sheets used to be called material safety data sheets, but now they're just called plain old safety data sheets. Those sheets include information such as the properties of each chemical or each piece of material that you might be using. It also contains the physical health, environmental health hazards, protective measures and safety precautions for handling, storing and transporting that particular chemical or component or material. It's pretty small there, a little bit hard for you to read, but it's easy to find in a workshop. There should be a manual or a folder containing all of the material safety data sheets for all of the different types of materials and oils that are available and that are used in your specific workshop. So if you're unsure if a particular material is safe to use, you can read the material safety data sheet and it will tell you what to do, tell you what gloves to wear, it'll tell you what fire extinguisher to use, it'll tell you what the environmental considerations are, it'll tell you what the health hazards are, and any other precautions when it comes to handling and storing that particular chemical. It'll be all on the material safety data sheet, so a valuable resource within a workshop. We're getting down to the end of the slides now. We need to talk a little bit about emergency procedures. So what to do in the case of an emergency. Workplaces are required to have an emergency procedures notice, not unlike this particular one. We have it in our workshop here at the college, near the front door. In certain circumstances where there might be a fire or where there might be some kind of emergency, it gives us some basic instructions of what to do. Specifically, a map of the building, potentially showing where the fire extinguishers are held, where there's things like first aid stations. Also, an emergency assembly point. It's going to also give you some quick explanations of what to do in those situations. It's going to highlight in detail where that emergency point is, emergency assembly point, where there is a fire or some sort of emergency. You would exit the building as quickly as possible. You would look out for others as well, and then we'd meet in that emergency assembly area where you would do a head count and make sure everyone has been accounted for. So there are procedures to follow. If you ever need to know what those procedures are within your workplace, you can look them up. Your fire warden or one of the officers within your workplace should know and should be aware of emergency procedures. It should be made visible to all employees. It should be somewhere near the exit or somewhere highly visible. It will tell you what to do in those situations. So that brings us to the end of this particular tutorial. I hope you've got something out of that. As students looking at this tutorial, you can now move towards or move to the next section here. I'll just click on next. We have the assessment tool that's required to be completed. There it is there. We can see we've got a download button just here. You can download that particular assessment tool to your own desktop if you're watching this, or laptop. Download that to your device. It is an editable PDF format, so you can answer all of the questions within the PDF. Once you've done that, you can save that on your own desktop. And as we get to the end here, you'll see there's a spot to, as we go beyond the very last page, and we keep on scrolling down. Once your assessment has been completed, you can upload your completed assessment tool here. So download it to your laptop or desktop, complete it in the editable PDF. Once you've done that, keep this box open and drag or drop or upload it to that spot right there. And we will receive that here at the college, and then we will mark that assessment once it's received. As you probably are aware, we're on some COVID restrictions at the moment. They won't go forever, but at some stage, if you're completing this particular unit on Zoom or by tutorial, you'll be required to come back into the workshop to complete some practical side of most of our assessments. So once again, if you've got any questions, by all means, contact me at the college. Andrew Tregoning's my name. I'm the automotive trainer, or one of the automotive trainers. Please read through that learner resource again. Feel free to log into the cloud whenever you like and look at those learner resources there. Look at that PowerPoint most of what you're looking for in the assessment will be contained in that PowerPoint. So it should be able to answer all of your questions. So good luck with your assessment, and we'll see you next time soon.